Good morning, DJ and PK. It's 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. Welcome in on a Tuesday morning. Well, the Utah Jazz did it. They bounced back from a dreadful 55-point loss at home, and they won on the road in Cleveland. Yes, they had Markkanen back, and he can score, and he makes the game easier for everybody else, which Will Hardy pointed out in his postgame after the 55-point loss when he was asked, what can the younger players take from this game and what can they learn? And basically that they're really dependent on their veteran teammates. The Jazz needed more size. They get Nurkic and Markkanen back. Nurkic is screening and scoring and rebounding. And Markkanen, scoring and obviously helping create space for other guys. And he's rebounding a little better here. He's picking that up. And a bounce-back game for Keontae George. 2 of 7 for 4 points. He just checked out of that blowout. But much stronger performance in this game. Now, of course, all of this happened last night. And yesterday we had Steve Cleveland on the show. And we're still going to play that interview. He said some interesting stuff, but obviously when we're talking about the 55-point loss, we don't know this win is right around the corner. Here's Steve Cleveland with PK and I. How surprised were you, Steve, to see an 89-84 game with BYU at one end of the Big 12 and Utah at the other end? Did that surprise you that it was a one-point game late?
Very, very, very surprised, to be honest with you. And part of it probably is I haven't watched Utah play a lot, but just watching comparative scores, I just didn't see this being a competitive game. Now, there's a couple things you look back in history and know that anytime you're having the University of Utah and BYU playing each other, there's going to be great interest and great energy and intensity, and guys are going to play well, and you expect that. But to be honest with you, just looking at what Alex Jensen is having to go through in terms of rebuilding a program, it's not easy to do. Obviously, it's much easier to be at home where you have fan base. But I wasn't at the game in person, but it looked like there were a lot of BYU fans there as well. Not that long of a drive. But I thought what Utah was able to do and pull off, and again, you had situations where Brown and McKinney both just kind of go off, and I didn't know a lot about the team, and so when I watched it, I was just amazed in how competitive it was, how guys just made big shots, and there didn't seem to be any nerves at all. And it's not that BYU didn't play well. They did. They did a lot of good things. AJ and Saunders, Keita, all of them were doing what they always do. But you get it again on the road, or you get it in a game where everyone expects you to lose. You just go into those kind of games, maybe a little more relaxed, and the pressure was kind of on BYU. So it was a great college basketball game. I'm not surprised that BYU won it. I'm just surprised how close that game and how competitive that game was. So kudos to Alex and his staff and his team for really going through a very tough time of rebuilding to play someone as good as BYU is. I know it's on the road, but they're a well-oiled machine. And I've watched them play all of their games, and they're really, really good. Kevin Young's done a great job, his staff. So fun to see that. Fun to see games like that where expectations are kind of low, and then all of a sudden they're met.
My concerns for BYU obviously don't include the main three. The only thing with Keita is staying out of foul trouble. I like Davis's approach to being kind of a junkyard dog, do whatever you need to do, bulldog mentality. But beyond that, that bench is really worrying me because they got 3 points the other night from the bench, and you're going to beat teams that you're supposed to beat, and you're going to have success in the conference for sure. But when you get in the NCAA tournament, which will determine the success of the season, you're like a rolled ankle away. In terms of cultivating a bench, how does Kevin Young go about it? Because I just don't know that they can continue with such little production and playing these other guys 35-plus minutes a game.
Well, that's a great insight. AJ and Saunders and Wright, they've been successful, and they've gotten good play out of Keita. Keita was hurt for a while. They miss him, his rim protection, and Kennard Davis is getting better. But you're right. After that, you just don't know. Boscovich is Kostick, Diamande, Mupu, Marus. They're all 2, 3, 4 point game guys, and and they're well represented internationally, but they just don't have that experience. And so I think the depth will be an issue. And, you're talking about a conference here where Arizona, Iowa State, Houston, Texas Tech, all of those teams are really, really good. And I don't know, I'm not as prepared as I probably should be on those other teams' depth charts, but I do know this, that it will be an issue if there's any kind of foul trouble or injuries. It'll be really difficult, especially on the road in this league, when you have to go to Arizona, when you have to go to ISU, when you have to play Houston, Texas Tech. There's a very, very competitive league. And if you have injuries or guys aren't playing well, it can be really difficult.
Abdul Ahmed has only had 4 games with BYU, so I don't know if you can make any really definitive statements about him, but what do you think about him? Because he would be, to PK's point, a 6th guy. It'd be something.
I did not hear the first part of that. So
what do you know about Abdullah Ahmed? He's only played 4 games with BYU. How much do you think he can contribute as far as adding some depth to the team?
Well, I think he can. We have to be understanding of the fact that he's, like you said, played 3 or 4 games. He doesn't have quite that experience. But he brings something to the table there with his athleticism and his energy. He runs the floor. I think he can. He's going to have to help. They do need to kind of energize that bench. And the only way, players can really grow up is to go out and be on the floor, make mistakes, and go through those situations, have some successes. And so I do believe he can help. And he needs to help because they just don't have that depth. They don't have I don't want to say depth. I want to say experience. They haven't been in those kinds of settings. So it's needed. I would expect that staff to continue to give playing time to those that, especially the problem is when you're in the preseason and you're up 20 or 30, you can work guys in and help them get their confidence. But from here on in, every night is going to be a challenge, and you just can't put inexperienced players in games where meaningful moments where you win, where you're looking at winning and losing games, you kind of stay with your core. But long term, to go through this conference, you're going to have injuries. You're going to have guys that kind of lose their confidence. And so to get some of that bench strength would be really helpful for Coach Young and his staff. So because a lot of teams are just one injury away, or guys get into a little bit of a slump, and you've got to now go on the road and play Houston, go on the road and play Iowa State. It can jar your confidence a little bit. So, I really believe in that staff and how they've developed this team. But there are the unknown things where injuries and guys lose confidence, especially on the road. Winning on the road, I don't care what their record is or what's going on or how successful teams have been. It's hard to win on the road. And we saw that against Utah, a team that no one clearly thought they had a chance of winning, despite the fact being at home. And I didn't know anybody. I was sitting there looking at the roster. I said, I don't know any of these people, But, this morning I'm looking at Terrence Brown and Don McHenry and Traore. And you look at guys like that and you go, hey, this team is really solid. So I wish Alex well and hope they can continue to compete and get better. I'm confident that BYU will be there at the end. They just got too much talent, great coaching, and a depth chart.
All right, I'm going to throw this at you then. You're playing to win the game, all right? That's the obvious statement. But how about if you would lose 1 or 2 along the way, you're still going to make the NCAA tournament. You're probably going to get a decent seed. Most likely you're going to make it to the second week, and then it depends on matchups and how you play in those individual games. But maybe in the first half, early in the second half, maybe give guys some more time, even if it ultimately cost you a game or two, the opportunity to have, 1 step back, 2 step forward. Do you buy that theory?
Well, I tell you what, my thinking is this. I'm looking at this roster right now. Looking at Boscovich, Kostick, Diamande, Mabu, Marus. We're talking about guys that have not played significant minutes. And it's way easier to play guys early in games the mistakes aren't so terrifying when, it's hard to put guys who haven't played a lot and put them in, with 7 or 8 minutes to go in a game,
right,
and expect kind of step in and make, that's unfair to those guys.
right.
But I do believe that even though Boscovich and Kostic and Diamante, they're all averaging about 3 or 4 points a game, they have experience. You start looking at these guys, and Boscovich is from Serbia, Kostic is from Austria, Diamante is from France, Mabouk is Senegal. These are guys that have been playing other places in the world, and I realize it's different, but I think that having those international players who have played from a very young age, I think that's more, the likelihood is that these guys will adjust. There's enough talent there. I think you got a coaching staff that will develop and pick and choose. I like the opportunity, especially when I had guys that have lost confidence in that 7 or 8 position. I can remember very quickly getting those guys in games early on, because that let them breathe a little bit. They got to touch the ball, so that if they are needed later in games or later in the season, you don't just have a rookie that's just bouncing off the walls and not making good decisions. I like the idea of taking guys to your 7 or 8 or 9 guys, sub those guys out. AJ needs a break, Saunders needs a break, Wright we know those guys are going to be in the games. But developing the bottom half of that bench would be a really wise thing, just for the sake of just injuries, road challenges, and all the things that are going on. And you start looking, you're at Arizona, you're at Iowa State, at Houston, Texas Tech. Man, that's murderer's row. Not only those good teams, those are great coaches, as is Coach Young. And I think Alex, he grew up. And I just respect that so much. And I know it's difficult. It's going to be difficult for him. But I remember playing against him teams when Rick Majerus was the coach. And we were just overwhelmed trying to get competitive. And eventually that happened, but not without some real whoopings that we received at their benefit. So I like this league and this conference. And we're going to see lots of upset nights. It's not going to surprise me any night somebody gets beat on the road, just because this league is so good and has so much depth.
You had to go through some rebuilds. You must have taken some beatings. What do you say to a team after a 55-point loss like the Jazz just suffered?
It's funny you should ask me that, because I had spent, as I prepared for this today and just thinking about it, I was thinking about the Jazz, and they're 1-5 in the last 6 games. They did beat Dallas, but I have watched this team, and when it's difficult enough when they're fully healthy. When they're not healthy, it's impossible to compete. And I don't know what we call this. I hear publicly that we're not rebuilding. We are rebuilding. We're not starting over. We're not going to just lose 30 games in a row and see what kind of pick we can get at the end of the year. This is an organization that's trying to win and compete, and I think that both Danny Ainge and Austin Ainge, they're really experienced, years and years of experience. People ask me all the time, is this a rebuild? And I said, well, I don't think that's what people are talking about. I think what they're talking about is we just got to continue to get better. I think focus on playing the guys that need to be played. You look at Markkanen, 28 a game, Keontae, 24 a game, Walker Kessler, 15, Ace Bailey, 10. You've got a lot of depth and guys that can play. It's just not winning the close games, putting themselves in a position. It's hard. I can't even imagine being in that situation and playing that league. You just got to stay positive with the guys. I think skill development stuff that's going on after games, before games, 2 or 3 game breaks, you're still working on those kinds of things where guys just got to get better. And there is some experience there. And, one of the disappointments for me, and I really, really like Walter Clayton Jr. out of Florida. I thought he would be kind of an impact guy, and he really hasn't been. But I thought that he'd be somebody that could really step in. I'd like to see him, see where he can go and what he can do. But, Yeah, I mean it's tough. It's tough, and this league's good, and you just got to be positive, and you got to work day in and day out. It just doesn't do any good to drag people in the mud and start pointing fingers. And I know fans can do that, but not coaches. I just don't see this staff giving up on these guys. But it's hard. Your gut never really feels good, and I've been involved in enough rebuilds from the high school, junior college, Division I. It's hard. And I think I spent way more time on culture than I did worrying about X's and O's. And I learned a lot about myself and about my guys, and spending time one-on-one with my guys and making sure that mentally and emotionally they were okay. I go back to that word culture, and I think that if you're trying to develop and build a championship culture, it starts with relationships with your players, relationships with your staff, and being really just open to thoughts and ideas. And there's no unless guys are, if there are effort issues, then shame on them and they come sit on the bench. I just don't think there are effort issues with this group. Injuries can be devastating for teams that don't have the depth and the talent. God bless those guys, man. I hope they get it going. I want them to be successful. And obviously we all have connections to the staff. You just have to hang in there and stay with it. And I trust them and I believe them. Hopefully there's some trades or a better draft or whatever the circumstances are. But I believe in Austin Ains, and obviously I believe in Danny and what these guys are doing. And I just hope that we can turn the corner where wins are possible and plausible. And right now, the last 6 games are 1-5, and unfortunately, the league is really good. And so I'll be there rooting them on, and I believe in those guys, and I just really, really hope that the confidence will swing and guys will start seeing that thing that ball going through the basket where they can go and win on the road. And a win on the road right now, no matter what happens at home, but winning on the road could really galvanize the team and give them the confidence to win at home. And I know it's really hard, but the interesting thing, the only win the Jazz have in the last 6 games is a big win over Dallas, 116 and 114. So maybe another game or 2 like that, and this group can get revitalized and get more confident with what's happening. I think the bases are all covered with coaching staff and organization. It's just guys just got to start believing and spending the time necessary off the court to find ways to win a few games.
Steve, we appreciate the time as always. Thanks for joining us. We will talk to you again next week. We're just 2 weeks away from another BYU-Utah game. So there you go. The rematch is coming.
Have a great week.
There's Steve Cleveland. When we come back, the Best of the Jazz post-game show. How did they do it? How did they bounce back and beat Cleveland? Stay tuned. Good morning, DJ and PK. It's 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. The Utah Jazz bounced back from a 55-point loss at home without Markkanen, without Nurkic, without Ace Bailey. They get him back, and they beat Cleveland in Cleveland. For more on how that happened, let's get to the Best of the postgame show.
Sure, Jazz recap here on DJ and PK 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. Jake Scott with you. The Jazz win. They beat Donovan Mitchell and the Cavs in Cleveland last night, 123-112. Big nights from Keontae George and Lauri Markkanen. Keontae, 32 points, 9 assists, 5 rebounds in the win. Lauri Markkanen, 28 points and 12 boards. Donovan Mitchell finished the game 21 points, 7 of 18 shooting in the loss for the Cleveland Cavaliers. Let's get to the postgame sound and Jazz head coach Will Hardy.
Yeah, we came in at halftime, and I felt like we started the game with a lot of focus. But as the half wore on, we got really sloppy with the ball. We had 14 turnovers in the first half. And that caused our communication, our effort to dip on the defensive side. But we came out in the second half, allowed 14 paint points, and only had 5 turnovers, and that's how you win on the road. We gave up 50 points in the second half. I thought the team was really connected. A ton of really, really good individual performances as well that deserve to be highlighted. First of all, I thought Ace had some really big possessions late in the game, both defensively, had a couple of offensive rebounds that were big plays for us. Really contributed to the win tonight. Keontae had 25 in the second half. Obviously a big third quarter, hit some big shots late. His ability to create offense for us continues to show itself, especially when the game slows down. I thought Lowry was rock solid. And then after last game where we got hammered on the glass, we win the glass by 20 tonight. And I thought the team made a really concerted effort on both sides of the ball to rebound. And I thought Nurk and Lowry, had big nights. Nurk had 17 rebounds, Lowry 12. Nurk continues to be kind of one of the unsung guys on our team. What he does for our group with his physicality, not just on the glass, but I thought he made a couple big plays around the basket defensively, and then he continues to help us create the advantage with his screening. So overall, a really, really high-level team win. To bounce back like that after last game really shows the character of the group that we have in our locker room.
Why, kind of big picture, is it important for guys like Keontae, Bryce, Zay to play with someone like Nurk?
I think Nurk gives us a little margin for error when it comes to creating the advantage. We talk about our offense kind of in three phases. There's create the advantage, keep the advantage, and make decisions. And Nurk really helps us with the first part, where our technique isn't always perfect with the ball. I think our young perimeter players, Keontae probably gets highlighted the most, but they've gotten a lot better. But we still have some moments where it's imperfect, and Nurk cleans up a lot of those messes. He's one of, if not the best screener in the NBA. And so I think he gives those young guys a margin of error. And there's nothing like shooting an open shot. In the NBA, they're hard to come by, and Nurk helps us get a lot of them.
You've talked about it before this season already, but this is just another game highlighting Lowry's physicality and really getting to the rim. And he just mentioned, nights where shots aren't necessarily falling, that's a way he can do that. And what have you liked about his, not the use of his physicality, but more the intention of using it?
Yeah, he's done a really good job of picking his spots. We came into the season talking about him using his physicality more. And then about 10 games in, he and I had a conversation where I was like, dude, you're going to die if you keep going like this. You're just crashing into everyone. I remember our game at Detroit where he just drove the ball so hard into their bigs over and over again. And his intent was amazing, but he was beating himself to death. And so I think he's really done a great job of recognizing when to stop and shoot his mid-range, when to kind of do the mini bump and shoot his little turnaround, and when to play with extreme force downhill and try to play through the bump. It gives him a chance to get to the end with something left in the tank. But he continues to grow as a player. He continues to show that there's a bunch of different ways that he can impact the game offensively. And depending on matchup, his physicality is a real tool for us.
Lately there's been a lot of, especially fans comparing Keontae's season to Donovan Mitchell's third season, which was Donovan's first All-Star bid.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering what you see as kind of advantages or disadvantages of doing that kind of a comparison.
I believe I read somewhere that comparison is how you steal joy. Keontae's having a great season. Donovan is a heck of a player. I have so much respect for him. The way he's carried himself during his career, the way that he plays, he's spectacular. But Keontae's running his race, and I think that has to be Keontae's focus. I recognize that our league is full of comparisons, and that's for other people to do. Fans can do those things if they like, and media can do those things if they like. But, my hope is that for us, like, we stay focused as a group and individually on what we have to do to continue to get better. I think that there's a little bit where that's that could make Keontae feel good because it's being compared in a positive way. But at the same time, I want Keontae to stay focused on just being Keontae.
That's Jazz head coach Will Hardy. Let's now move on to the players and hear from Keontae George.
It's kind of easy when you have guys who are, versatile and dynamic and when you give them the ball in space, they can get to, their spots. I mean, I've talked to you a little bit before about just giving the guys the ball in space and, good things happen. So I think for me, it's just about trying to put the guys in closeouts at times. And, obviously tonight it was a pocket, but every other game, like I said, it's going to be totally different.
Nurk's talked to me before about, like, sometimes when he first has teammates that they don't know that sometimes he's going to hold that a little bit longer and that, like, he wants to give you that opportunity, that he knows it's not about him in that moment. How valuable is that to have a guy who's just going to, like, give up a play for his teammate? I
mean, that's the most unselfish thing you could do is screen. It's actually funny. Will was trying to get Nurk to roll early on, and he was like, "Coach, I said screen." And from then on, I'm like, "Oh, okay, I see how this is going to go." But man, Nurk is, he's not afraid to call somebody out. He's not afraid to, say something to you. At the end of the day, like, Nurk screening like that it makes the game so much easier. You playing against fives all game, like I said, playing out of closeouts, and we put in the work, so I'm able to, get to some of the shots that I work on every single day.
And you guys are taking this road trip day by day. Next up is Chicago. How do you look to just take this start, the road trip, into that?
Obviously we started the road trip the right way, like we wanted to, and we did. Our last matchup, we understand, how that went, and we know they're not going to lay down when we walk into their building. So, we got to be all hands on deck. Got to be locked in. They got phenomenal players on the end. They're a phenomenal team. We know that they got the capability of, playing really good ball for all 48. So, for us, it's just about playing Jazz basketball, understanding how we want to play, and then just being locked in on, like I said, personnel. And understand how we want to play. Like, when we locked in on personnel, everything else take care of itself. We're all professionals. We all understand the game. So, just knowing what each person likes to get to, it helps us.
That's Jazz head coach Will Hardy. Let's now move on to the players and hear from Keontae George.
Hardy say this and Keontae say this, but they think you're the best screener in the league. When you hear words like that, what does that mean to you?
I take a pride in that. I really do. So it's always great when you're being recognized, but sacrifice yourself for the team good and players good. Get open my teammates. I really try to do best in the league there.
With your screening, what do you like playing with Lowry and Keontae and just the style, the way the Jazz play too? How do you feel like you fit in?
Of course. They kind of play different way. But I think I do a really good job open space for them and just read them and see, what they like, what they're not. And I think at this point in the season, we had a really good chemistry.
A really good win to start off the road trip in a tough place to play, too. What stood out to you about tonight's win?
Just respond. The way we just lost home, this is not who we are and who we were trying to be. I'm proud the way we responded. And, you don't want to lose home by that and that many points. But also, it's hard to win on the road no matter who you play. So I think that's a great win. When
you see your team respond like this, and it's happened a couple times this season, what have you kind of started to learn about the way this team works and how connected you guys are? Every time we execute what coach and coaching staff ask for us, we're in a pretty good spot to win the game. Sometimes not going our way, but we're a young team or have a lot of players. Sometimes not going to go our way, but we can't just give up, and we don't want to be that team. So always fight through and make it possible.
There's Nurk, 11 points, 17 rebounds in the win for Yusuf Nurkic. The Jazz beat the Cavs 123-112. Up next, the Jazz travel to Chicago to take on the Bulls tomorrow night. Tip-off will be at 6. Pre-game coverage begins at 5.
There is the best of the post-game show. When we come back, we're talking playoffs with Jason Cole. Stay with us. Good morning, DJ and PK. It's 97.5, the KSL Sports Zone. Well, Pittsburgh Steelers are all done. Beaten at home by the Houston Texans 30-6. Texans blew it open late. It was a tight game, but Houston's defense, Pittsburgh's offense just couldn't do anything. Just couldn't do anything. And Houston kept fumbling the ball away. They're dropping snaps, losing the ball, but it didn't matter. The defense just cleaned everything up. Don't think Houston can get away with all those turnovers in New England next week, but they made it to next week. They beat the Steelers. Now, we talked with Jason Cole during yesterday's show, talked about the other 5 playoff games and some of the other big storylines in the NFL. Here's Jason Cole with PK and I. The NFL playoffs are going on, and all I hear anybody say is, it's wide open. And I think, it largely is wide open. Because the best teams don't seem to have playoff experience, so we're not sure we really trust them in the big moment. And everybody seems to have a little bit of a flaw.
You don't think Bo Nix and
Drake
Sam
May?
Darnold can just roll through this?
Yeah, right.
Yes.
Drake May just nice through butter kind of stuff. They're ready to go. Sam's never had the yips or anything like that before, has he?
It's never happened. So that's what I was getting to. Is that how you see it? Wide open. Don't ask me for a prediction. Nobody knows. These are one-possession games, and one receiver drops a ball. And, man, maybe it was just me. I thought I saw a lot of drops this weekend. I thought I saw a lot of quarterbacks getting let down by a lot of receivers.
I would say A.J. Brown probably owes
Most recently.
Jalen Hurts an apology. Because he'd still be running right now if he had caught that one over the middle. I mean, he was behind. That was just such a big drop. It wasn't just the first down, but it was the sizable gain because he was behind the defense. I mean, it was just such a bad drop. I would say this. There were some drops, but like Trevor Lawrence, the 2 interceptions that he threw in that game, and those are so much on him. Those are such Trevor Lawrence plays. When you look at it going, man, you just have all sorts of ability, but in key situations, like, what are you doing, man? Like, really, what are you doing? You got to look off. On the first one, it's a zone defense. You got to look off the defender. On the second one, like, you're staring right at the play, and Tre'Davious White has got perfect coverage, like just perfect coverage, and you still try and force that ball into him. And this is where, like Jacksonville puts together this really good season. Their defense is playing off the charts, but they can't get past their quarterback, who's the former number one overall pick, who by this time in his career, you would think he should have fixed all of this. And that's the kind of the story of how the NFL playoffs are going to unfold.
One of our NFL guys that we have on during the season last week was going off about Josh Allen being 0-4 in the world, and my partner DJ was saying, oh, come on, man, that one where Kansas City came in with just a few seconds left, you can't really put it on him. Where do you stand in assigning individual credit and blame to a quarterback, whether his team wins or loses?
Like, the quarterback is the most important player, and we've geared the rules so much towards the quarterback that there is an inordinate amount of credit or blame that goes up to those guys. There's no way around that fact, right?
Right.
At the same time, teams. This is a team game. It's all the classic cliches that you talk about. But at the end of the day, I measure the truly great quarterbacks of this game are ultimately measured by the number of titles that they win. And I know that that's not totally fair. Like, we could sit here and say Dan Marino is more talented than all of them, and that John Elway was more gifted than, Joe Montana, or, we can go on down the line, right? And that Terry Bradshaw won 4 titles, but there's nowhere we're putting him in the same group with Tom Brady or Joe Montana. You can do that all the time. But, there's a reason we call Tom Brady the greatest player of all time, because he's got the rings. He's got the pelts on the wall. And they play this game for a reason. They play to win titles. Entertainment is important, no question about it. But you got to win. You got to win titles in order to be elevated to that upper echelon.
Having said that, the guy who's got the experience in the playoffs, who I would think, Bills to the Super Bowl, except it's just Josh Allen, and it seems like a fairly mediocre group around him, that they really lean on his greatness. Is that the way you see the Bills? Because if it's not him, then it's maybe it is Drake May. Maybe it is Bo Nix.
Yeah, because wait a second. What team out there do you sit there and goes that's just loaded with some gigantic array of stars? Philadelphia was, right? Like they had, Saquon, AJ Brown, Devontae Smith, Goddard. They have Jalen Carter, but they're out now, right? The 49ers were loaded with stars, but all of them are in the hospital basically right now. These are all really interesting, okay teams that all have some kind of liability, but none of them are just loaded with 6 deep with guys who change games. So Josh Allen is the one quarterback left, him and Stafford, who's changed games the most with their ability to play quarterback. And Josh Allen's got, James Cook is a good player. Both tight ends are good players. Deion Dawkins is a terrific player with 4 or 5 Pro Bowls.
The defense blows though, doesn't it? I mean, they've won a lot of high scoring games.
Yes, but they also choose to play that way. There's some of that where they're playing for turnovers, and a lot of the reason why you do that is that you are undermanned and you're going to play a certain style. You're going to try and bait people into playing higher tempo games than they want to play. But it is also because there's an inadequacy of their talent. I fully recognize that, and they're in transition on defense. There's no question about it. But they can score. And if they get into a game where it's a back and forth, they're as good as anybody, especially in this playoff setting.
I think you answered my question on the Niners that injuries will catch up to them at some point. If you think otherwise, let me know now. But I think that's what you were saying, and obviously with Kittle being the latest. So then I go to the Rams right now. And you mentioned Stafford. I was waiting for you to put him in the Josh Allen category, which obviously I think he belongs there. Speaking of Stafford, and then they needed to squeak by, but they did squeak by. So now they got to go out on the road again. I don't necessarily care about venue. I'm looking at the Rams thinking, they've got a really good shot against Chicago. How much do you care about the travel and all that stuff adding up? It seems to me on an individual game basis, if I had to bet, which I would never do, but if I did, I would go with the Rams.
I would go with the Rams because I think that they're better across the board. Like who on the Bears at this point in time would you trade for their counterpart on the Rams?
I got you.
There's some guys who are equal, right? There's some guys who you say, that guy's as good as that guy, and that guy's as good. And maybe there's a couple of players where you'd say, oh, this guy on the Bears is better. But not in any position where you'd say that's a truly game-changing position.
Right.
So does Caleb Williams have the ability to be as good as Matthew Stafford? Obviously, yes. I mean, he's the number one pick for a reason. Is he there yet? No. Did he make a lot of progress? Yes. But Stafford is still the way better player, having come off a way better year, maybe his finest year of his career. So from that perspective, I give the Rams, just head up. I make them favorites. But there's, playing in January in Chicago ain't fun. I don't know what the weather's supposed to be like this weekend, but that's brutal. And when you're a dome team, or you've been a dome quarterback for your entire career, that's an unpleasant experience. So we'll see how that one plays out. But I am concerned. I'm concerned about the Rams from that perspective. Do I think that they're better? Yes. But there is an equalizer factor in this one above that changes the outcomes of games.
But you feel better about the Bills going on the road to Denver because nothing's worse than Buffalo? I mean, as far as weather goes? Because Buffalo's favored. Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, look, every day that you're not in Buffalo is a vacation.
I was in Buffalo over the summer.
And that's whether you live there or play there. That's true. But look, I kid about Buffalo. Niagara Falls is great. Downtown Buffalo is kind of cool, but let's be serious. You can be in Buffalo this time of year, or you can be anywhere else. Anywhere else wins.
You made a little bit of a satirical reference there to Bo Nix. I get your point. But then I look at Sean Payton. If the Broncos pull this off and say they have the opportunity and get it done and literally go all the way, does this really elevate Sean Payton in your mind as one of the, certainly from the offensive perspective, one of the better ones all time?
Well, he would be the first guy since Weeb Eubank, and I think only the second guy all time. Well, the first guy certainly in the Super Bowl era to win Super Bowls with two different teams, right? So that's number one. He would be the first guy since Weeb Eubank to even win championships with two different teams. It's number two. The fact that he's taken that division by storm this fast in a really loaded division, the top three teams, and then, the Raiders are still trying to figure it out. I would just say that, look, Sean Payton would put himself in Hall of Fame territory. I'm not, like right now, if you told me I had to vote on Sean Payton for the Hall of Fame, I'd have to really think about it. I don't know what his record is off the top of my head and all those other things. But this is the kind of thing that sets you apart and starts that discussion about whether you deserve to be one of the next guys in there. We have a pretty good list of coaches who belong in the Hall of Fame. Belichick's up this year, and then we have Mike Shanahan, Mike Holmgren, Tom Coughlin. I think those guys are there. Then it drops down to guys like Dan Reeves and Marty Schottenheimer and some others. I would say that this would elevate Peyton up into that group of guys with Holmgren, Shanahan, Coughlin. He's not in Belichick range yet, but in that next group.
So do you believe that defense wins championships for all the quarterback talk we've just had? Because I'm looking at the teams in the playoffs, and if you're under 20 points a game defensively, you're pretty good. Now the Jaguars are 19-8. They're out, and Minnesota missed. But Seahawks, Texans, Broncos, Patriots, there's the Eagles are the top five, all in the postseason. The Eagles are out now.
Yeah, I mean, look, defense generally wins championships because the game becomes more physical in the playoffs, right? Like refs don't want to make the cheap calls. That's not to say that some cheap calls haven't been made, like the late hit on Jalen Hurts yesterday in the 49ers game was kind of a silly call. But they tend to not do that. They tend to let a lot of things go more in this time of level because you've got better teams playing better football, and referees just don't want to be the guys who determine games. They just really don't, despite whatever players really think of them. So you get less calls, like one or two less calls in a game. You get things taken a little bit further. The game gets a little bit more physical. That always favors the defense. But when I come back to the quarterback is which quarterback do you trust who can make 3, 4, 5 plays in a critical game, like a 3rd and 6 or a 3rd and 7, a 3rd and 8? Who's going to come through in that critical moment? Who's going to fit a ball in against really tight coverage? And there's just like I look at Sam Darnold and I watched that game against the 49ers to finish the season. Like they couldn't be more scared of Sam Darnold to let him start really ripping the ball around and throwing it. They shut it down. I think he threw two somewhat challenging passes in that game. I didn't see anything in that game that made me say, "Oh my God, look at Sam Darnold! Look at the play calling they're making and see what they're letting him get away with." I just didn't see that in any way, shape, or form, and that just indicates to me what the coaching staff thinks of it. And so, Darnold, Bo Nix, does a really nice job. This is, I guess Sean Payton's talked about this. He does a great job of avoiding negative plays like sacks. And that's a really good thing. It's important. I'm not dismissing that. But just because you avoid making mistake plays doesn't mean you're a guy with a propensity to make great plays. And that's where I sit here and say, I don't trust that guy as a quarterback just yet.
Sure. What's your level of concern that what we've known of the Chiefs is not what we will get going in the short-term future?
Well, they need to be totally revamped if they're skill position players, and they still got to rebuild their offensive line. So there's a lot of work to be done. They still have Patrick Mahomes, and Patrick Mahomes can cover up for a lot of things. I mean, he got into a Super Bowl last year behind one of the most threadbare offensive lines you'll ever see. They had Tooney playing left tackle, and they still got Taylor over on the right tackle, and he's horrible. I just don't understand why Andy Reid still got him out there, but he probably doesn't have any other choice. But they need to fix that. And I just remember talking to people, and they were like, "Oh, Rashee Rice is coming back. Rashee Rice is coming back. Look at this." It's like, that ain't Jerry Rice. That's Rashee Rice. Mm-hmm. I mean, he's okay, but he's a number 3. He's not a number 1 or a number 2. And Xavier Worthy, I mean, he's not even Deshaun Jackson. Deshaun Jackson could really scare a defense and get her open over the top and make some big plays and change the way that a defense is going to play against you. Xavier Worthy doesn't do that. And so and Kelsey is, if he retires, he retires. If he doesn't, he doesn't, we'll see. But Kelsey's not what he once was. And he's not going to put in the work to get to that high a level. I mean, he's got a different life now. And I don't blame him for that. Like, he's got a lot of really great things going on and a lot of effort he's put into doing things off the field to make himself a lot of money and involved with a woman that most guys would dream about being with, right? So Kelsey's not, ever going to return to what he was. He's going to be just okay. And so they need to revamp it all. They got to do some serious work to get some really serious weapons.
We'll leave it right there for now, Jason. We appreciate the time and all the opinions. You're never short. We love that about you.
Absolutely. Take care, guys.
There's Jason Cole. When we come back, what is trending? The headlines are next.